In my administration, I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. No one will be above the law. We also need the best protection of classified information. We can't have someone in the Oval Office who doesn't understand the meaning of the word confidential or classified.
Hi again, everyone. It is 5 o'clock here in Washington, D.C. I'm Alicia Menendez in for Nicole Wallace. Despite those calls before he became president, we know how Donald Trump did not abide by his own words. He took extremely sensitive government documents with him to Mar-a-Lago after he left office and has since been criminally charged for doing so. Where that case stands now is this. In an investigation having to do with the proper handling of secrets, Special Counsel Jack Smith is now stressing to Judge Eileen Cannon the importance of keeping witness names a secret, warning that not doing so would leave them vulnerable to, quote, significant and immediate risks. In a filing late yesterday, Smith wrote that if certain details are not redacted, they would disclose the identities of numerous potential witnesses, along with the substance of the statements they made to the FBI or the grand jury, exposing them to significant and immediate risks of threats, intimidation, and harassment. As has already happened to witnesses, law enforcement agents, judicial officers, and Department of Justice employees whose identities have been disclosed in cases in which defendant Trump is involved. Now, this is on top of a brief Smith filed just the day before, which described how a prospective government witness has been threatened over social media. And those threats are now the subject of an ongoing federal investigation. Smith asked Judge Cannon to keep an exhibit which describes those threats under seal and even keep Trump's legal team from viewing it. Trump's legal exposure in this classified documents case, he was charged with 40 criminal counts, standing in stark contrast to the current president, who, as we know, as of yesterday, will not face charges stemming from the investigation into his handling of classified material. Special Counsel Robert Hur's report even included this distinction, quote, after being given multiple chances to return classified documents and avoid prosecution, Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. According to the indictment, he not only refused to return the documents for many months, but he also obstructed justice by enlisting others to destroy evidence and then to lie about it. In contrast, Mr. Biden turned in classified documents to the National Archives and the Department of Justice, consented to the search of multiple locations, including his homes, sat for a voluntary interview, and in other ways cooperated with the investigation. And that is where we start this hour with Politico national correspondent Betsy Woodruff-Swan, plus former Congressman from Florida David Jolly, and back with me at the table, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and former U.S. Attorney Harry Litman. Harry, this request to the judge from a prosecutor, just how unusual is it?
Well, it's a motion for reconsideration, and that is very unusual, but it underscores the stakes of it. She is in a box of her own making because she accepted Trump's submission and said that in order to keep this information sealed, which Smith says will really endanger witnesses, you have to have the highest legal showing. In fact, you don't. It's completely down here, and the 11th Circuit has said so. That's the circuit above her. And remember, we have this ongoing drama with her. She's been slow walking the case, and she had these early sort of debacles that the 11th Circuit reversed. And we've been all wondering, will she make another clear misstep that would give Smith the wherewithal to say maybe it's time to recuse her? So she either has to back off because she's blatantly wrong here, and even on a motion for reconsideration, I think she probably will, or she's looking at the strongest possibility in the last year of a motion to recuse her.
Harry, it was striking to me that there's even this ask from Smith to not allow Trump's own legal team to see some of these elements. Again, that seems highly unusual.
Well, there's certain discovery that is protected, others that isn't, but it's not unusual when you have a showing, and that's what he made just 2 days ago, as you were saying, that you know what, people are being intimidated. Judge Cannon, you yourself are fielding death threats. This is what we have to do to protect witnesses and not intimidate and provide for a fair trial. Unusual? Sure. but par for the course for Trump.
David, it speaks to the reality we find ourselves in. Anyone involved in something that goes after Trump, the receiver of violent threats. Am I wrong in finding it alarming that this might not be completely obvious to Cannon?
No, this should set off alarm bells. And look, I think the legal terms we use: witness intimidation, witness protection. And so we talk about filings. The reality is this is thuggery. I mean, what Jack Smith is concerned about is thuggery on behalf of Donald Trump, his team, and the people around him. They are thugs that engage in this witness intimidation to try to stop adverse testimony to the former president's interests. And in some cases, it could be people, several degrees of orbit around Donald Trump that maybe he's aware engage in this. But the real concern is culturally, it very well could be people that Donald Trump has no idea who they are. But he has unleashed this cultural movement that has given permission to violence and intimidation, and we are seeing the results of it. The manifestation of that was January 6th itself. We're going to engage in violence to intimidate Mike Pence to not certify the election. That is a dangerous moment, and it is a timestamp of where our politics now rests today, where our culture rests. But also the one person that could cool the temperature and de-escalate this is actually Donald Trump himself. And he never, ever does that. He activates it. He doesn't de-escalate it.
Betsy, I will concede that when there are sections and details that are redacted, I become more interested in what those sections and details are. In this latest filing from Smith, he lists some of the documents that he thinks should remain sealed or should remain redacted. And I think it's very interesting, gives you a sense of what it is he's talking about here, which is a list of all the FBI agents who searched Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, an excerpt from a witness's grand jury testimony that reveals non-public details about Mar-a-Lago's layout, including where Trump's son Barron's bedroom is, reports on witness interviews, including of civil servants and former close advisors to defendant Trump. So I see that list, and it seems pretty obvious to me, Betsy, why details like that should be protected. It also, though, it reveals the level of detail that could be in here. I wonder what your reporting is telling you about just how wide and just how deep this investigation has gone.
The document shows that what Congressman Jolly referred to as thuggery is already, in Jack Smith's view, having a harmful impact on his ability to move forward with his investigation. In those portions that you just cited, there's a description of a witness interview where the witness refused to let investigators record the interview because this person worried that it would hurt their standing or their relationships in Trump world if a recording ended up being made. So that culture of punishment, of ostracization, is something that actually concretely impacted Jack Smith's team's ability to gather information. And without a doubt, the specter of threats of violence hangs over every person who's linked to this, including, of course, to your point, civil servants, career government officials, people who are not independently wealthy, people who have had low-profile jobs deliberately on purpose for their entire careers, who could face life-altering threats of violence. That's the description that Jack Smith gives of it if their names become public. FBI agents in particular are extremely sensitive about their names becoming public in relation to investigations because threats against them can come from any number of avenues, and because their careers in the Bureau are often so long-running. For their names to get out there is something that the FBI is always extremely concerned about. And the fact that Trump's lawyers are trying to make the names of so many FBI personnel public is something that Jack Smith seems to find deeply upsetting at sort of a gut level.
David, let's just talk about things that are happening in parallel here, remind ourselves what else Special Counsel Jack Smith is dealing with. In the other case he's prosecuting against Trump, the election interference case, the judge there had to impose a gag order. So Jack Smith, he doesn't have the luxury of focusing on the case he's building, like sort of purely legally speaking, because he has to simultaneously fight to keep people safe, fight to keep people free from attacks. I just wonder, in your estimation, to what extent that makes the actual legal case just that much more difficult.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went there, Alicia, because I think the real scary part is what this foretells for the January 6th case itself, and particularly for potentially star dispositive witnesses like Mark Meadows. I mean, what happens when we start to see the Cassidy Hutchinsons of the January 6th case that Jack Smith is prosecuting in Washington. What we are seeing in the documents case of intimidation by the president, or what we've seen in the past when he tweets out names of either witnesses or attorneys or prosecutors. Imagine in the January 6th case, when his own jeopardy is really on the line, and we start to see very high-profile witnesses that the entire country is hanging on their every word. What we're seeing the intimidation in the documents case is going to look like small ball, I'm afraid, to what we're going to see on the January 6th case. Sure, Jack Smith and the judge have to worry about protecting those witnesses, but the amount of bravery and personal mettle it will take, like that we saw with Cassidy Hutchinson, is going to take with Mark Meadows. And I think what Betsy hit on is very important. Life-altering, lifelong. I use the case of Mark Meadows. Maybe it's him, maybe it's not. But whoever that dispositive star witness is in the January 6th case, the rest of their life will be changed after that.